The silence should have warned him. I've learned that the ocean often speaks volumes in its quiet moments. Anthony White, a marine biology student, ignored that silence one morning. He ignored the absence of other surfers, ignored the nearby seal rookery, and paddled out, unknowingly entering the domain of a great white shark. The summer of 2014 brought perfect weather to Surf Beach, California. Sunshine filtered through the morning mist, painting golden patterns on the glassy ocean surface. Anthony, just 22, was exactly what you'd expect from a California marine biology student with a passion for surfing. He'd been surfing for 8 years. His friends described him as fearless, adventurous, but with a deep respect for ocean life. He had an infectious enthusiasm and a tendency to seek out remote breaks. His academic side was more methodical. He always researched surf spots and ocean conditions before paddling out. They had spent weeks planning this solo dawn patrol session. This morning adventure was meant to be the perfect combination of his two passions, surfing and marine biology. Anthony arrived at Surf Beach just as the sun was rising, spending his first hour checking conditions and waxing his board at the remote location. He was restless, telling other early morning surfers that the real waves were beyond the crowded spots, despite the area being adjacent to a massive seal rookery at Point Conception. On that fateful morning, Anthony set out early, carrying his 6'2" shortboard and minimal safety gear. He had signed the beach access log indicating he planned to surf the main break. But somewhere along the way, Anthony spotted what looked like perfect waves breaking further offshore. Despite the prominent warning signs about marine life in the area, Anthony paddled out about 150 yards from shore to position himself in the lineup. The area was beautiful, too beautiful to resist, with seals barking in the distance and crystal clear water revealing the sandy bottom below. While setting up for the perfect wave, Anthony suddenly noticed something that should have alarmed him. The water was unusually quiet, with no other surfers in sight, and the seals had stopped their constant chatter. But he was so focused on catching the wave of the day that Anthony ignored these warning signs. Finally, Anthony had positioned himself perfectly in the lineup and was sitting on his board, legs dangling in the water. Then suddenly, a terrifying silence fell over the ocean. Out of nowhere, there it was. A massive great white shark emerging from the depths, maybe 20 feet below where Anthony was sitting. What Anthony didn't realize was that he had entered the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. Great whites are living fossils that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive attacks. These apex predators can detect blood from up to 500 yards away and sense the electrical impulses of a beating heart from several meters distance. When hunting, great whites approach from the depths in explosive bursts of speed, exceeding 35 miles per hour, using the element of surprise to deliver devastating attacks with bite forces reaching up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anthony reacted instantly, but there was nowhere to run. The massive predator struck from directly below, covering the distance between them in a split second. Anthony managed to see the shark's massive form just before impact, but the attack came with such explosive force that both he and his surfboard were launched into the air. The sound of Anthony's screams cut through the morning silence as the shark's jaws clamped down on his torso. He fought desperately, punching at the predator's snout as it held him in its powerful grip. The massive head shook violently as razor-sharp teeth sliced through flesh and bone. The great white released Anthony after several seconds, typical behavior for these predators when encountering unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. Blood immediately began clouding the pristine water as Anthony, despite his severe injuries, began paddling frantically toward shore on his damaged board. The shark circled below, following the blood trail but maintaining its distance, waiting to see if this strange prey would weaken enough to approach safely. Anthony managed to cover nearly half the distance to shore, his movements becoming weaker and more erratic as blood loss and shock overwhelmed his system. A jogger on the beach heard Anthony's desperate screams and immediately called for help. But the remote location meant rescue was still minutes away. By the time lifeguards arrived, Anthony had disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean swallowing him whole. 2 hours later, Anthony's mangled surfboard washed ashore, bearing the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite marks of a great white shark. The massive gouges told the story of an encounter with one of nature's most efficient predators. Anthony's body was never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The university established a memorial scholarship in his name, and Surf Beach was temporarily closed while marine biologists studied great white activity in the area. The attack led to enhanced warning systems and additional safety briefings for surfers. As the sun set over the California coastline, the memory of Anthony White served as a stark reminder. I've spent years studying the ocean's most adaptable killers, and one attack in particular still haunts me. It happened on a seemingly perfect morning in Galveston Bay, Texas. The sky was blue, the breeze was ideal for fishing, and a young charter captain was taking tourists out for the trip of their dreams. But beneath the surface, a bull shark was patrolling, and a tragedy was about to unfold with shocking speed. David Walter, only 26, was the kind of entrepreneur who embodied the American dream. A first-generation immigrant, he'd built his fishing charter business from scratch. His clients loved him for his infectious enthusiasm and his knack for finding fish. Friends knew him as methodical and safety-conscious, always double-checking his equipment, driven by a desire to give his customers the perfect experience. These Dallas tourists were celebrating a bachelor party, and David had promised them a great day near the Galveston jetties. They spent the morning pulling in red snapper and speckled trout. David expertly managed the boat while the cooler filled with their catch. He navigated to his favorite spot, just a mile offshore, where the depth dropped to 25 feet, attracting bait fish and the predators that hunted them. They were having the time of their lives, already talking about another trip. But then, as they prepared to move, disaster struck. The boat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died, leaving them drifting in the strong Gulf current toward the busy shipping channel. David quickly diagnosed the problem. A clogged fuel filter, usually a simple fix. But as he worked, the boat's anchor began dragging in the powerful current. The situation was becoming dangerous, and David knew he had to act fast. Local charter captains had warned about unusual activity in the area, but such warnings were common in Texas waters. The water was murky from recent storms, making it hard to see what lurked beneath. David had fished these waters for years without incident, and he reasoned that the popular spot would be safe with other boats nearby. With his clients growing nervous, David made a fateful decision. He stripped down and dove overboard to manually reset the anchor, hoping to stabilize their position while he fixed the engine. He didn't know he had entered the hunting grounds of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. They are incredibly adaptable, at home in both salt water and fresh water. Specialized kidneys allow them to regulate salt levels, swimming far up rivers and into freshwater lakes where other sharks can't survive. They can appear virtually anywhere, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their aggressive temperament and willingness to investigate anything in their territory makes them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. They have a bite force of 1,350 lbs per square inch and electroreceptors that detect electrical fields from meters away. They employ a relentless bite-and-release pattern, striking repeatedly with the tenacity of a pit bull until their prey stops moving. David worked underwater to free the stuck anchor, but the current was stronger than expected, and the anchor was wedged in debris. A 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the fishing grounds for hours, drawn by the chum slick created by David's successful charter. The predator's acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by David's rapidly beating heart and the scent of blood from hundreds of yards away. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. David never saw the shark coming through the murky water. It struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg with crushing force before immediately releasing and circling for another attack. The impact was so violent that David's clients heard his muffled scream through the water. David fought desperately to reach the surface, but the bull shark continued its relentless assault. True to their species' aggressive nature, the predator struck again and again, each bite tearing away more flesh. Once committed to an attack, bull sharks rarely give up, continuing until their prey stops moving. The multiple attacks created a feeding frenzy, and the murky water became a churning mass of blood and violence. David's clients watched in horror as the water around their boat turned red. They screamed for help and radioed the Coast Guard, but David had already disappeared beneath the surface, overwhelmed by the bull shark's relentless assault. The Coast Guard arrived nearly an hour later, finding only David's torn shorts floating in blood-stained water. The bull shark had vanished into the murky depths, leaving behind only traumatic memories for 4 witnesses. There's a tale they tell in every boating safety course along the Texas coast, a cautionary story. It's about David, whose body was never recovered from the Gulf. His charter business vanished with him, and the incident led to new safety measures, emergency beacons, backup communication. But thousands of miles away, in the clear waters of Hawaii, another predator was about to show why it had earned such a terrifying name. This time it would happen under the cover of darkness, where even paradise becomes a hunting ground. The evening of April 22nd, 2016 brought perfect conditions to the remote coastline near Hana, Maui. A gentle wind rustled through the palm trees as the sun painted the sky. 24-year-old Christian Smith couldn't have asked for better conditions for his solo fishing trip at one of his secret spots along Maui's untouched coastline. Christian embodied the laid-back Hawaiian lifestyle. With his easy smile and deep knowledge of hidden fishing spots, he was a local favorite at the surf shop where he worked. Friends described him as fearless and independent, always venturing to remote locations other anglers avoided, searching for that perfect experience only the islands could provide. That evening, Christian loaded his truck with heavy tackle designed for the large, predatory fish that hunted Hawaiian waters after dark. The location he'd chosen was breathtakingly beautiful, but completely isolated. A secluded beach accessible only by a rough dirt road winding through dense tropical vegetation. Christian arrived just as darkness was settling over the ocean. The spot was perfect. A protected cove with deep water close to shore and a coral reef that attracted schools of bait fish during night hours. He set up his gear methodically, rigging the heavy equipment he'd need for the monsters that prowled these waters after sunset. As Christian waded into about 6 feet of clear water to cast beyond the reef break, everything seemed perfect. The water was so clear he could see the white sand bottom, even in starlight. He'd already landed 2 nice fish when disaster struck. Moving through the water to reposition, Christian's foot slipped on wet volcanic rock. He fell hard against sharp coral formations, opening a deep gash on his leg. Blood immediately began streaming into the pristine water around him. Local Hawaiian fishermen had warned about increased predator activity during night hours, but Christian had fished these waters countless times. What he didn't know was that the remote location had become a hunting ground for one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. As Christian tried to assess his injury in the dim light, he realized the cut was deeper than expected. His splashing and the metallic scent of blood created the perfect storm of stimuli, triggering a predator's hunting instincts. Unknown to Christian, he had attracted the attention of Hawaii's apex predator. Tiger sharks are perfectly adapted for nighttime hunting in both shallow and deep waters, earning the nickname "waste basket of the sea" because they'll eat virtually anything. Their stomachs have contained license plates, tires, even other sharks. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet long and possess an indiscriminate appetite that makes them particularly deadly during nighttime hours when they move into shallow water to hunt. Tiger sharks can detect blood from several hundred yards away, and their lateral line system senses the slightest vibrations in the water, making escape nearly impossible once they lock onto a target. Christian began wading toward shore, but his movements became increasingly erratic as blood loss affected his coordination. The coral cut was more serious than he'd thought, and the metallic scent drifting through the water was like ringing a dinner bell for every predator in the area. A 10-foot tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge when Christian's blood trail reached its sensitive nostrils. Unlike more cautious reef sharks, Tiger sharks are known for their bold, reckless approach to anything in their territory, especially during nighttime hunting hours when they become most active. Christian never saw death coming through the dark water. The attack was sudden and devastating. The tiger shark struck from the side, its massive jaws clamping down on his injured leg with crushing force. The impact knocked Christian off his feet, sending him tumbling in the deeper water. The predator's attack was relentless and indiscriminate. Tiger sharks are known for their tenacious grip, often holding prey while using their muscular bodies to roll and tear. The shark maintained its grip while striking with its powerful tail, creating a whirlpool of violence. What makes tiger shark attacks particularly horrific is their feeding behavior. Once they taste blood, they enter a feeding frenzy, biting repeatedly until prey stops moving. Christian fought desperately, but the predator's grip was unbreakable, and each movement only intensified the attack. In the darkness, I've always been drawn to the sea, but also deeply respectful of its power. Christian, a surfer in Hawaii, knew that power well, or so he thought. One day, his screams echoed across the empty coastline. No one was there to hear them as a tiger shark began its brutal assault. There was no escape. They found Christian's truck at the end of the dirt road the next morning, his fishing gear still on the beach. But Christian was gone, claimed by the very waters that had once brought him so much joy. A massive search began, helicopters and hundreds of volunteers scouring the area. 4 days later, they found his body on a beach 8 miles away. The Hawaiian community held a traditional blessing ceremony, and his surf shop colleagues created a memorial fund for ocean safety education. But the ocean's dangers aren't confined to Hawaii. Off the rugged northern California coast, the same species that claimed Anthony White was about to show that even the most experienced watermen are never truly safe from the ocean's apex predators. November 8, 2017, dawned crisp and clear in Fort Ross, Northern California. The morning fog lifted, revealing a dramatic coastline where Pacific swells crashed against ancient sea stacks. For Ryan Walsh, 29, it was perfect diving weather. Calm seas and good visibility promised a profitable day, harvesting abalone, prized mollusks that fetch premium prices in the finest restaurants. Ryan was a commercial abalone diver, a dangerous profession. His weathered hands and sun-damaged face told the story of 6 years spent in frigid Pacific waters, free-diving to depths that would terrify recreational divers. Friends described him as methodical and safety-conscious, but also driven by an obsessive pursuit of the perfect abalone beds hidden in the rocky depths. That morning, Ryan launched his small boat with his dive partner, Marquez, a younger diver who looked up to Ryan as a mentor. They had worked together for 3 seasons, developing the wordless communication that comes from shared danger in one of California's most hazardous occupations. Ryan chose a productive rocky reef in 25 feet of water. The location was challenging, with strong currents, kelp forests, and the ever-present danger of entanglement in abandoned fishing nets littering the bottom. As Ryan suited up in his thick wetsuit, he felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension. The water temperature was a bone-chilling 55 degrees, but Ryan had built a tolerance over years of expo. His dive bag contained an abalone iron, measuring gauge, and collection bag, the tools of his dangerous trade. The first few dives went perfectly. Ryan descended through the kelp canopy to the rocky bottom, where clusters of red abalone clung like living jewels. His experienced eye identified legal specimens, and his practiced hands pried them loose with surgical precision. But on his seventh dive, disaster struck. Working to free a particularly large abalone, Ryan's fin became entangled in abandoned fishing nets. The nearly invisible monofilament wrapped around his leg like a spider's web, holding him against the rocky bottom as his air supply ran dangerously low. After a desperate struggle, Ryan managed to cut through enough netting to break free. He made an emergency ascent, lungs burning as he fought through the kelp toward the sunlight. When he finally surfaced, he was exhausted, disoriented, and dangerously far from his boat. What Ryan didn't realize was that his distressed movements had attracted the attention of California's apex predator. Great whites are living fossils that have patrolled these waters for millions of years, perfectly adapted to hunt in the kelp forests where seals and sea lions congregate. These massive sharks typically reach 12 to 16 feet and can weigh over 3,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are capable of explosive bursts exceeding 35 miles per hour, launching them completely from the water. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect electrical fields from several meters away and track blood trails from a 500-yard distance. During autumn, mature great whites patrol northern California in greater numbers, following the migration patterns of their preferred prey. These sharks are incredibly intelligent, capable of learning and adapting hunting strategies, making them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to humans who venture into their territory. Marcus, watching from 300 yards away, immediately recognized something was wrong. Ryan floated motionless at the surface, clearly in distress. Marcus started the engine and raced toward his partner, but the distance seemed impossibly far. The 13-foot great white had been patrolling the kelp beds when it detected Ryan's emergency ascent. The shark's acute senses picked up electrical impulses from his rapidly beating heart, the scent of abalone in his collection bag, and the erratic movements of a creature in distress, all triggers activating predatory instincts. Ryan never saw the attack coming. The great white struck from below with devastating force, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso with a bite force reaching 4,000 pounds per square inch, slicing through his wetsuit and into his vital organs. The shark's initial bite was exploratory, typical great white behavior with unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. The predator released Ryan and circled back, following the blow. I've always been struck by how quickly tragedy can ripple through a community. Ryan's death did just that. One moment he was diving for abalone, the next his screams were echoing across the water. His thick wetsuit offered little protection against the shark's teeth, which caused massive internal bleeding. Marcus, his partner, managed to pull him from the water, but Ryan was fading fast. Despite Marcus's desperate attempts at first aid, Ryan succumbed to blood loss just 20 minutes after the attack. It sent shock waves through the small abalone diving community in California. New safety regulations were implemented, and Marcus became a dive safety instructor. The beds at Fort Ross were temporarily closed as biologists studied the great white activity. While those great whites patrolled the kelp forests of Northern California, hundreds of miles south in Florida's warm waters, the same aggressive species that claimed David Walter was about to turn a spear fishing competition into a feeding frenzy. This time, the attack would unfold in crystal clear water, where every horrific detail would be visible. August 14, 2013, dawned with perfect conditions at Jupiter Inlet, Florida. The morning sun sparkled on the emerald Atlantic waters, creating ideal visibility for the annual South Florida spearfishing tournament. Alex Paul, a 33-year-old construction foreman from Miami, couldn't have asked for better conditions. Alex was deeply dedicated to Florida's spearfishing community, spending his weekends free diving in those crystal-clear waters, honing his breath-holding abilities, and perfecting his aim. That morning, Alex joined 40 other competitors at the tournament briefing. The target species included cobia, kingfish, and grouper, prized game fish with high point values. Alex had scouted extensively and identified promising spots where large fish were likely to be found. The competition began at sunrise, with boats spreading across the designated area. Alex and his dive buddy Carlos headed to a productive reef in 30 feet of water, where schools of bait fish attracted larger predatory species. The water was exceptionally clear with 80-foot visibility, perfect for spotting and stalking their quarry. For 2 hours, Alex had moderate success with smaller fish, contributing to his score. But as the morning progressed, he became focused on finding a trophy fish for the top prizes. When he spotted a massive cobia cruising the reef edge, Alex knew he'd found his target. The cobia was magnificent, easily 50 pounds and worth maximum tournament points. Alex hyperventilated to extend his bottom time, then dove to intercept the fish's path. His shot was perfect, striking just behind the gills, but the wounded fish immediately took off for deeper water. In his excitement over such a prize specimen, Alex became separated from Carlos and the other divers, finding himself alone in an isolated reef section. The wounded cobia's struggle created a significant blood trail as Alex fought to control the powerful fish. When Alex finally surfaced with his prize, he was bleeding from cuts caused by the sharp fins and exhausted from the underwater battle. The combination of fish blood and human blood, along with the dying cobia's continued struggles, created the perfect stimuli, triggering the predatory instincts of every shark in the vicinity. What Alex didn't realize was that he had attracted one of Florida's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. Bull sharks are perfectly adapted to the state's warm coastal waters, possessing a remarkable ability to survive in both salt water and fresh water. These powerful hunters typically reach 6 to 8 feet in length and have specialized kidneys that regulate the salt content in their blood, enabling them to appear anywhere from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect vibrations from struggling fish hundreds of yards away and sense electrical fields from several meters distance. Unlike other shark species that may be more cautious around humans, Bull sharks are known for their bold, direct approach to potential food sources, often competing directly with spear fishermen for their catch. Their aggressive nature and opportunistic feeding behavior, combined with their ability to strike repeatedly rather than bite once and retreat, makes them one of the most feared predators in American waters. The 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the reef when the scent of blood reached its nostrils from hundreds of yards away. The predator's acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by both the struggling fish and Alex's rapidly beating heart. Alex saw the shark approaching and tried releasing his catch, hoping to distract the predator with the wounded cobia. But bull sharks are opportunistic feeders with insatiable appetites, and multiple potential prey items only intensified their aggressive behavior. Instead of taking the offered fish, the shark. The water turned crimson so quickly. A bull shark, they said, had struck Alex with relentless determination, again and again, until the sea around him was stained. His death, I learned later, came from massive blood loss during the 40-minute flight to the trauma center. It's a stark detail that stays with me. The attack itself was swift and brutal. Massive jaws clamped down on his leg with crushing force, severing major blood vessels. The predator's multiple strikes caused massive tissue damage. He fought, they said, punching at the shark's snout, trying to reach his dive knife. But the bull shark's aggressive nature meant it continued its assault. Other divers, alerted by the commotion and the spreading blood slick, raced toward Alex. They found him floating unconscious, his spear gun and wounded cobia drifting nearby. The bull shark had vanished, leaving only devastating evidence. Despite immediate first aid and a Coast Guard helicopter evacuation, it wasn't enough. The tournament was canceled, and the spear fishing community mourned one of their most respected members. But something good, if anything good can come from such a tragedy, did emerge. Alex's death led to enhanced safety protocols at tournaments. New requirements mandated closer proximity to dive buddies, and organizers began providing emergency response training. The association even established a memorial fund promoting safer diving practices,